I think they're close to have gotten it right. JM, you said earlier you think the uh, makeup and the depth of the two lines is comparable for the Eagles' offenses compared to defense. The Eagles over the years have put resources toward both of those two groups with the belief that you build from the trenches out and have done a good job. But it seems they've done a better job with the offensive line than the defensive line, as per Pro Football Focus. You got your Maga Mag guys here on Birds 365, a Thursday edition. Rob Motti, Associated Press, going to join us coming up about 25, 30 minutes from now. John, I mentioned this before we went to break. The Pro Football Focus ranked the best defensive lines in the National Football League. The Philadelphia Eagles came back as the number one offensive line. They also ranked the defensive lines. They had different tiers that they put the teams in. The top six teams were in tier one that they described as elite, understandably so. The Rams is the best defensive line. The Commanders is number two. I guess they're expecting a bounce back year because the Commanders were not the number two defensive line in the National Football League. They might have been rated that going into last season, and for some reason they're holding that ranking. I need to kind of see it. They're saying Chase Young might have to start the season on
the
list.
Start the season. I think that's about talent because I think not only Chase Young but Montez Sweat as well missed a bunch of time last year. And if those guys are healthy, it's going to be a good defensive line. But as you mentioned, Chase Young's probably not going to start the season. So, I would guess it's more of a projection and hope that those guys are healthy. And if they are healthy, it's going to be a good defensive line.
I think it's overrated. I would not have them as number two. Packers number three. I'm okay with that. Steelers number four. I'd have the Steelers ahead of the Packers, but 3-4, 4-3. The Bucks with the defensive line they've had there. They think they'll fill in for Ndamukong Suh. Fine, thank you very much. Even though he's going to be elsewhere, I don't doubt that.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. And this is a big if as well. We're talking about injuries. If Akeem Hicks is healthy, oh my God. I don't know how you block B2B and Akeem Hicks.
Yeah, two very big boys there in the middle for the Bucks. I would have the Bucks probably in the 3-4 range rather than 5, but that's okay. Johnny Mac's with me on that. And the last of the elite category is the 49ers. Any defensive line with a Bosa included in it, I think, must be included in the potential dominant tier at the top. The next group, 7 on down, were tiered as strong, but with a weak point. The 7th ranked team is the Chargers. There's another Bosa. 8th ranked team, the Saints, who I like a little bit more coming into the season than John does. We know Eagle fans will be rooting wholeheartedly against them this year since the Eagles have their first-round draft pick. I get that. Sorry to say. I think if Jameis can stay on the field, he'll actually help them win games. He was winning games before he went down last year. I think the Saints will be okay this year, and they do have a good defensive line. And then number 9, the Philadelphia Eagles. So according to Pro Football Focus, the Eagles have the 9th best defensive line. I think they're close to have gotten it right. JM, you said earlier you think the makeup and the depth of the two lines is comparable for the Eagles' offenses compared to defense. The Eagles over the years have put resources toward both of those two groups with the belief that you build from the trenches out and have done a good job. But it seems they've done a better job with the offensive line than the defensive line, as per Pro Football Focus, because the offensive line is ranked number 1. The defensive line is ranked no better than 9th. Your thoughts on Pro Football Focus?
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I'd put the Eagles probably in the top 10 somewhere. I'd have to look at it a little bit more closely as far as actually where the offensive line is stronger than the defensive line. But the two groups are the strength overall of the team. The top tier offensive linemen, Jason Kelsey, obviously Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, those are potential all-pro players, whereas the Eagles don't have that any longer on the defensive line. Fletcher Cox is not that any longer. Brandon Graham's not that any longer. They're aging a little bit, descending players. And then you have some projection too, like, Hassan Reddick. Is he going to fit? I just mentioned, is he going to fit that Khalil Mack role? On paper, he fits it. He's not going to be Khalil Mack, but he's a good player. Jordan Davis is all projection. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to be really important to this team. One of the most important players because of how they want to play defense. But it's all projection. He's still just a rookie. You got to see it. I think he's going to be Vita Vea-like, but I can't say he's Vita Vea. I could say Vita Vea is Vita Vea. And, whereas you look at Akeem Hicks, as I mentioned, injury concerns, but I know what he is. Chase Young and Montez Sweat, injury concerns. They're still young players. So there's more projection to the Eagles. But the depth is really good. We haven't even brought up Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat is the other edge rusher. I saw one of these list things. They did top edge rushing duos. And with the Eagles, they had Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham. No, it's going to be Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. That's going to be your two edge rushers. And I know you're not a Derek Barnett fan, but that's good depth. That is really good depth. Milton Williams as your fourth defensive. We haven't even mentioned Javon Hargrave, who was a Pro Bowl player last year. And then Milton Williams is your fourth defensive tackle. I can't even find playing time for Milton Williams, who's a good young player. They are deep on the defensive line, and they are good. Are they top five? No, because they don't have the Bosa. They don't have the Mac. They don't have the superstar player, but they're still really, really good.
Here's the reason why you need that depth on the defensive line. We went through the offensive line back at the start of the show in segment number 1. If all goes well, and the Eagles have turned the corner on how you keep your players healthy by not practicing. So assuming complete health along the offensive line for the Eagles all year long, the backups don't get on the field. The backups are there in case of injury. You hope to keep your players on the field throughout the entire game. That's not the way it works in the National Football League. On the defensive side of the ball, there are substitutions in and out, down in and down out in the NFL. Very infrequently do you keep your same 11 guys on the field from one play to another. Somebody's coming in, somebody's going out. That's where it works to keep people fresh, get them off the field. So you need more defensive players along the defensive line than you do along the offensive line. I hope the depth is up to snuff. I think that Hassan Reddick is going to be out there almost every single play, that he's a first, second, and third down player. You touched on Josh Sweat. Brandon Graham, a little bit better left side defensive end for me. One of the good things about Brandon Graham is his complete flexibility. You can use him anywhere along the line. I don't know if that's going to be the same coming back from the injury that he came back from, and the fact that he's now an aged player in the National Football League. Is Brandon Graham going to actually cut into Josh Sweat's playing time this year, do you think?
Not if everything goes to plan. If it happens, it's probably not a good thing. That would mean to me that Josh Sweat is not performing at the level the Eagles think he's going to perform. And I think he's going to perform, for that matter. I think he's a really good player. So if he is cutting into that playing time, I think it's a bad sign. I think it's nice depth. It's a nice insurance policy, but I think it's a bad sign.
And that's something we got to wait till the season to find out if that's exactly the way that it plays out. But the Eagles' 9th best defensive line in the National Football League right now. Still, I can't get over the Commanders' number 2. They've got some talented players who have
talented group.
Yeah, but should it be about projection or should it be more about results?
Well, because it was injury wise, like if you rewind a year, then it is about results. Sweat was unbelievable. Montez Sweat the year prior. Jonathan Allen was one of the best defensive tackles in football. Deron Payne was really good before they started fighting each other. Um, and Chase Young was, and we had, I think, Grant Paulson on the show, and Chase Young was a bit of a disappointment from Washington's perspective because they expected a Bosa, and he wasn't a Bosa, but he was still really good. And then they both got hurt last year. So in a way, it's about production and projection. I mean, they missed a ton of time, Chase Young and Montez Sweat last year. If those guys have already proven they can play, now Chase Young, because of where he was picked and people expected Nick or at least Joey, and a lot of people said he was better than both coming out, and he wasn't, or at least he hasn't been to this point. I don't know. I think it's about both. Those guys have produced. They've all produced, but last year they had injuries, and we can't legislate injuries, so you got to go back. Is my assumption of what they're thinking.
Here's the reason why I would disagree with their overall ranking of them. Chase Young last year ended up playing 9 games, so he missed slightly less than half the season. He wasn't all that good in the 9 games he played either. He had a sack and a half in 9 games. His sack numbers are off because he missed almost half the season. Well, you want to prorate it? Go ahead, jump it up to 3. He got a sack and a half in 9 games. You can't just chalk it all up to injury. He did play in 9 games.
And people were, and I remember having this discussion with Grant, and people were expecting more. But again, and this does not make Jonathan Gannon popular in Philadelphia, but man, he does not give a what about sack numbers.
So do you think they signed Hassan Reddick over Jonathan Gannon's best beliefs?
No, he just doesn't care. In other words, people are going to grade. He wants to pressure the quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He wants to pressure the quarterback greatly. He just doesn't care about that final number. So other people are going to grade Hassan Reddick on, does he get 12 and a half sacks like he got in Carolina or whatever he had last year? I think it was 12 and a half. And he's not. And if it is 6, but the Eagles are effective and the Eagles are pressuring the quarterback, and the Eagles, and both Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon say that there's 2 stats they look at and what they want to win at, and they believe are provable winning stats. One is obvious, and that's the turnover battle. Everybody knows that. The numbers are just astronomical. If you win the turnover battle, you got a good chance to win a football game. And number 2 is explosive plays, limiting explosive plays. If you limit explosive plays or you get explosive plays offensively, you're probably going to win the game. And they say the analytics and the advanced data and all that crap is points to those 2 things. So while he wants to pressure the quarterback, and I used to have this discussion with Jim Schwartz, Jim was the same way. They play a different way, but it's like a lot of good things can happen if you don't get a sack, but you're pressuring the quarterback. Sack's never bad. It's never bad. You're not going to say, oh, I don't want a sack. It's always good for the defense. But there are other good things that can happen, and that's one of the reasons Brandon Graham has been underrated. So I just pulled up Pro Football Focus. In the 9 games that Chase Young played, they had him graded as the 24th best edge defender, 24 of 108. That's good.
Okay.
Montez Sweat, 22 of 108. Jonathan Allen, 3 of 109.
Yeah,
And
he
And
actually played
Deron
well last
Payne,
year. That I acknowledge. I think they overrated the Washington's defensive line just in general last year. Did Pro Football Focus, but I got no problem with the Allen one. He was one of the best defensive tackles in the National Football League, and a guy who I said in the early stages of Birds 365, I was hoping got the free agency this offseason so the Eagles could make a play for him. Yeah, that never happened. The Redskins got the Commodores got the contract extension done with him because he's one of the best DTs in the nation.
And Montez, by the way, is one of the most underrated players in the league. He's one of those guys that he's so long, and he's got like that J.J. Watt natural ability to knock down the football. He just has a feel for it. So he gives opposing quarterbacks a lot of headaches trying to throw around him. And it's interesting because I'm looking at the numbers now. Montez played 483 snaps before he was out. Chase played 477 before he was out. You know, if those numbers, you look at Allen's at 772, Payne's at 837, that's where they should be. And that will make a huge difference if those guys are healthy.
Maybe it was because the Eagles beat the Commanders twice last year. The last couple of years, the Eagles would find a way to lose at least one game to Washington. Maybe
quarterback helped, I think, with that. Quarterback, Washington quarterback. I'm not talking. The Eagles quarterback helped, but the Washington quarterback helped more.
What do you think about Carson Wentz this year down there? He's trying to take the pressure off himself. I saw some quotes from him in one of their workouts, which, by the way, 15 teams around the National Football League having mini camps this week, one of which it isn't is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles did beat them twice, and we know their quarterback questions and Taylor Heineke and everything else. Carson taking the pressure off himself a little bit by saying, I just have to be the best me I can be. He's not trying to add to the expectations down here in Washington. Do you think he's going to be successful at being able to take himself out from underneath the Klieg lights that he's been under the last 2 years?
You know, real quick before I address Carson, you know, you've probably seen that Chad Johnson's in town. I guess he's, training with a fighter. So I don't know what he's doing.
Ocho Cinco?
Yeah, he's in town. He was at the Phillies game. He says he wants to move to Philadelphia, all this stuff. And then he was on Twitter yesterday saying, hey, can I come watch the Eagles at minicamp? And everybody, oh, we don't have a minicamp yet. So Ocho Cinco did not know the Eagles are not having a minicamp, as you mentioned. Most teams are. But getting back to Carson Wentz, I've seen enough. I don't expect a turnaround. I think the best hope is what he did last year in Indy, right? I mean, he wasn't bad from a statistical standpoint. He was able to win some games. A lot of it was because of the rushing game and, trying to limit his bad habits as far as taking chances and doing things like that. But every once in a while, and certainly for Indianapolis last year, it was in the biggest spot against a really bad team. You're going to have those really bad games. I think that's Carson Wentz. I don't think it's getting any better than that. And I think if anything, he's probably got fewer weapons in Washington right now. Other than McLaurin, can you count on Curtis Samuel? I don't know. Antonio Gibson, I think, is a good player, but I don't know. Is Logan Thomas going to be healthy? Their offensive line was always a strength, but they lost Brandon Sheriff. In Europe, they haven't had Trent Williams for a long time now. Morgan Moses, these were the people that were the strength of that offensive line. That doesn't exist anymore. So I think he's got a lesser supporting cast than he had in Indianapolis. So I don't expect much better than what we saw there.
And I think Scherf is going to be a major piece that they're missing this year. That guy's been one of the best guards in the National Football League.
Oh, yeah.
For the last 3-4 years running, and they let him get out of town to Jacksonville. They got to get the McLaurin thing done, right? Because you just went through their weapons, and their weapons are a little on the lacking side, the best of which is McLaurin. He's not at their camp this week. We know that the wide receivers got paid this year. The Eagles kind of set the bar with A.J. Brown for that draft class that he was in, both he and Deebo Samuel holding out to get into that neighborhood. They have to break down and pay him that kind of money. Maybe not quite as high as A.J. Brown, but certainly right in the neighborhood. Got to be damn close to it. Are they going to get there before the season starts?
Yeah, I would think, and they drafted Jahan Dotson, which was a strange pick in the first round. I thought a little bit too early for him. So I guess they want him in the mix pretty early. But
you think they made that pick knowing that McLaurin's contract was going to be a major issue?
Maybe, I like Terry McLaurin. I've said it. I think he's one of the most underrated receivers in football. I'd pay him. Maybe they think of it the other way, is he's not he shouldn't be that top tier. I think they're playing with fire. I'll say with Washington, I have much more questions offensively than defensively.
They got the second best defensive line in the National Football League.
Well, that's what I mean.
Pro Football Focus.
And they have some talent in the back seven as well. Not, the strength is the front, but they're not terrible. Jamon Davis was a first-round pick at linebacker. Cole Holcomb is one of those underrated guys who sort of very instinctive, that type of sort of like their TJ Edwards. Kendall Fuller's back there. William Jackson you might remember him from Cincinnati. They're okay. They're good enough on defense. Offense, I don't like the offensive line. I mentioned all the attrition over the years. It's no longer a strength. I don't know how you can count on the weapons or the quarterback. So to me, and we have been brought up. I mean, Jody, there's always this off the field angst, and it's not just Daniel Snyder. And now you got Jack Del Rio, and everybody's mad at him. I feel bad for Ron Rivera. I'm not concerned about the Washington Commanders. Let's put it that way. I think they're better than the Giants, but I don't think that's saying much. I think this is a 2-horse race in the NFC East.
As do I. And the only reason we got off on this Commander tangent is the fact that Pro Football Focus ranked their defensive line second overall in the National Football League. I'm not buying it. And well ahead of the Eagles, who know better than the 9th defensive line in the National Football League. And I like the Eagles' depth better on the defensive line than I like the Commanders. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys. We'll take a quickie timeout here when we come back. Hope to be joined by our buddy Rob Motti. Covered the Eagles for years here in Philadelphia for the Associated Press. They gave him a big-time promotion last year. Covered the entire National Football League. Motti keeps his eye on the Eagles. He gets back here to Philadelphia as often as he can to have the Eagles as his team to cover. He's become a Birds Tampa kind of guy. So we'll talk some football with Rob Motti from the Associated Press. Next here on Birds 365.